start with this. A zesty exchange between up-and-comers Sandy Ryan and April Hunter. Sandy says, Bavo, as in Kirsty Babington, she'd beat April Hunter again. She said, she beats her again for me. Get that easy money, girl.
Yeah, April Hunter didn't like that.
April said, Sandy, pipe down with your gang shit. Not long before Chantel Cameron smokes you anyways. Hopefully you're not just on before the bell and people get to actually see you, eh?
Referring to how high up on the cards Sandy Ryan's fights are.
Sandy, who said, April, you chat the most shit. I gave my opinion. I think Bavo will beat you again. And before the bell, will you even get on a live stream after you got beat your last fight? LOL.
That's right, she lost her last fight.
She suffered her first professional loss last year to Kirsty Babington, a common opponent between her and Sandy Ryan. Sandy, who said, tell Twitter you turned down my team's offer to fight you on my debut, and you and your team turned it down, LOL. Don't mention my name, you bum dosser, to which April Hunter replied, ha ha, you mentioned me. I didn't turn down nothing. I'd fight anyone. My team made decisions that make sense financially. Fighting you for pennies doesn't when we can build it up for a big payday. Now stop trolling me, Sandra. I'm off to bed. To which Sandy Ryan tweeted, LOL, build it up for a big payday. The fight's long gone. You was the opponent for early stage of my career. Now I'm off to fight world-level fighters. And this makes for a great fight, this domestic rivalry between Sandy Ryan, who campaigns in the junior welterweight division, April Hunter, she campaigns in the welterweight division.
They're not about to fight, you understand?
There's a Cold War brewing between the people over there at Boxer/Sky Sports and the people over there at Matchroom and DAZN. We know Sandy Ryan is promoted by Matchroom, and April Hunter fights under the Boxer banner over there on Sky Sports. Thus, I don't expect these two to lock horns anytime soon, but the synergy of the rivalry and what the fight could be down the line, this is a fight to watch out for, provided that April Hunter can get herself back in the winner's bracket. I would very much like to see her have a second fight with Kirsty Babington.
Sandy fought Kirsty and made it look easy.
Whereas April Hunter, she faced that same Kirsty Babington in her last fight, and she was dished out her first professional loss. I would very much like to see April Hunter run that back with Kirsty. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that April lost her last fight. It's still very early in her career, and a loss happening that early in a fighter's career, believe it or not, it can be quite beneficial. It can bring to light certain problem areas that need attention. For April Hunter, these are the problem areas she has to work on. I like her chances in a rematch, though I don't know if the rematch is scheduled. Kirsty Babington,
she's coming off of 2 consecutive victories.
Bavo capped off the year by giving April Hunter her first professional loss. April Hunter
sports a professional record of 4 wins with 1 loss, no draws.
Sandy Ryan sports a professional record of 3 wins, no losses, no draws, 2 knockouts, something like that. She's set to be returning to action very soon, and according to Eddie Hearn, she's going to make a considerable step up in competition. I could very much see Sandy facing a former champion at 140 pounds, perhaps a Victoria Bustos or an Erica Farias.
La Pantera.
Context is key here, folks. Sandy Ryan is a young, unbeaten fighter with only 3 professional fights. So any one of those fights with any one of those former champions really would be a considerable step up in competition for her. Not a lot of fighters that have 3 professional fights, just 3 fights, are ready to take on former champions and seasoned fighters as early as Sandy is. That's a testament to how good Sandy is. That's why she
frightens me.
Yes, she does. That's why she's Ring IQ's 2021 Prospect of the Year. This is a fighter that shows a lot, and I mean a lot of promise. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see Sandy Ryan facing the likes of an Erica Farias or someone like that, someone along those lines, in her very next fight.
Ryan versus Hunter ain't next.
In spite of the barbs traded quite publicly over social media, it could be a long time before we see Sandy Ryan lock horns with the likes of April Hunter, though it's a rivalry that if it picks up steam, it could be something. It could be built into a big fight. The warring fighters, warring factions. Boxer and Sky versus Matchroom and DAZN. Sandy Ryan versus April Hunter. It could be something.
For now, I expect to see Sandy against the former champion.
And I'm expecting a Babington rematch by way of Sky, if not next, after next. Sky and Boxer are invested in the career of April Hunter, and it behooves her to run that back with Kirsty. It behooves her to get that back.
I'll tell you, I like what I'm seeing so far.
I like the idea of this fight. In other news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, I'm sure most of you have heard by now, this is just my reaction to this news, that Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez reportedly now looks set to fight Julio Cesar Martinez on March 5th, as Juan Estrada has been ruled out due to post-COVID issues. The WBC flyweight champion would be moving up to super flyweight, according to ESPN Mexico, and I'm just being honest, it's a decent fight.
It is.
Great stand-in, Julio Cesar Martinez. But in many ways, it feels like this heralds the end for the trilogy.
Feels like the trilogy never really got off the ground.
And depending on what happens here between Nicaraguan legend Chocolatito Gonzalez and young Mexican WBC flyweight champion moving up to super flyweight, Julio Cesar Martinez, depending on what happens between these two guys, you know what?
What?
We may not get a trilogy.
It feels like they're letting Juan Estrada off the hook.
I ain't beating around the bush. I don't think Juan Estrada actually won his last fight, his rematch with Chocolatito Gonzalez. I feel that Chocolatito did enough that he deserved the decision, but it was given to Juan Estrada. And in light of this news, that post-COVID symptoms are the reason Juan is pulling out.
He's making off like a bandit after that home cooking is what he's doing.
It's just how I feel. If by some chance Roman Gonzalez loses to Julio Cesar Martinez, well, there goes the trilogy.
If he wins, then there's still a chance it happens.
And it will come as no consequence to Julio Cesar Martinez, who reigns as the WBC's flyweight champion. This is supposed to be a super flyweight contest, so if he wins, it's not like Chocolatito has a belt for him to win, and if he loses, it comes as no consequence to Julio's reign as a champion downstairs at flyweight. So for Julio, it's pretty much inconsequential, though he does get to fight on the biggest stage he's ever fought on against the biggest name he's ever fought. We all know Roman Gonzalez is pretty much royalty at or around these weights.
And he's an offensive whirlwind.
As is Julio Cesar Martinez. These are two very aggressive customers, two very come forward.
These are two very aggressive fighters.
Very aggressive. The aesthetic of this match, I think, won't disappoint. Young Julio Cesar Martinez, 26 years old, sports a professional record of 18 wins, 1 loss, no draws, 14 knockouts. Never been stopped. More seasoned 34-year-old Roman Gonzalez, Chocolatito, sports professional record of 50 wins, 3 losses, having been stopped once by Sorung Visai.
41 fucking knockouts.
He's literally stopped more people than Julio Cesar Martinez has fought as a professional, at least 2 times over. The saving grace for Julio is that he's younger, fresher, and less war-torn than Chocolatito Gonzalez. Chocolatito, who hasn't fought since that Juan Estrada rematch approximately a year ago?
Well, close to a year ago. It was in March of last year.
Julio saw action more recently, late last year in November against McWilliams Arroyo. Julio saw action 2 times last year, whereas Roman fought once, only once, and that was against Juan Francisco Estrada. You wonder if all that time off doesn't help him or hurt him. Given the aesthetic of that Juan Francisco Estrada rematch, the fact that it really was a war, both guys, they got hit a lot. Maybe he benefited from the time off, or maybe the time off has allowed ring rust to collect. We really won't know until he returns to action. I don't think the climb in weight will bother Julio Cesar Martinez because he's such a young guy. He might feel refreshed, invigorated even, that he doesn't have to cut the extra pounds.
That extra 3 or 4 pounds.
Because they're both offensive whirlwinds, I think the aesthetic of this match won't disappoint, but it is disappointing that Roman won't get to fight for a world title. I mean, even if he wins this thing, what does he win?
It's not a title fight for Julio either, but at least he can say he shared the ring with a legend.
It's disappointing, and I can't help but feel that Juan Francisco Estrada is making off like a bandit is what he's doing. He got that home cooking, and now there may not be a third fight between those two guys. Finally, Anthony Yarde's trainer, Tunde Ajayi, says Joe Smith isn't getting Canelo. He has to look at us.
Lions in the camp.
His trainer Ajayi told Dev Sani on the lowdown, the longer Anthony has to prepare and get better, no one is beating him. I believe this in my heart. When the time is right, because everything is timing, Anthony Yarde will beat all the guys in a fashion where he won't leave doubt, just like Lyndon Arthur. Yarde's outspoken trainer added, I've said it over the years. Tunde Ajayi has never trained a fighter to win on points. Anthony's record speaks for it. Anthony is a knockout merchant. I didn't see anything new from Joe Smith Jr. in his defense against Steve Gaffard. Anthony Yarde is a different proposition. Like us, he has come up the tough way and always had his back against the wall. He is a fighter continually getting better.
Wait, didn't you just say you didn't see anything new from him?
Tunde added, he's continually getting better, having dethroned dethroned some legends of the sport.
That's true. He's beat the odds 4 times.
Joe Smith Jr. has been the underdog with the bookies at least 4 times in his career. Tunde added, "We went up against legend Sergey Kovalev and come up short. Joe Smith came up against one in Bernard Hopkins and knocked him out."
The circumstances were different in those fights.
Sergey Kovalev was coming off avenging the loss to Eleider Alvarez and getting his brown belt back, the WBO title, right before he faced Anthony Yarde, whereas Bernard Hopkins was out of action for a while, something like 2 years ahead of that Joe Smith Jr. fight. Better still, the bookies had Bernard Hopkins the favorite in that fight.
Joe Smith Jr. don't give a fuck about no bookies.
Don't give a fuck how they price a fight. From my perspective, Frank Warren will do what he always does and deliver. The WBO have said Joe Smith has to fight Anthony Yarde next. People expect Anthony Yarde to win a world title. Joe Smith talks paydays, and Frank can deliver that. Joe Smith isn't getting the Canelo fight, so he has to look at us.
I'll tell you, Tunde might be onto something.
Very recently, Joe DeGuardia, who handles the career of Joe Smith Jr., he's had a lot to say. He says that if Joe Smith Jr. keeps winning, a Canelo-Alvarez fight is an eventuality. He said that they're not going to wait for Artur Beterbiev. They've wasted enough time, and they want to get back out there and make up for lost time. But he's painted into a corner. It's either you unify with Artur or you satisfy your mandatory in Anthony.
I said it before and I'll say it again.
You can only seek refuge in a Canelo-Alvarez fight if Canelo actually starts making hard inquiries for a Joe Smith Jr. fight, for a Joe Smith Jr. WBO light heavyweight contest. But if Canelo ain't biting, you gotta fight either one of these 2 guys. You either have to unify with Artur or fight Anthony, because the only way you get around Anthony is by unifying with Artur.
The WBO haven't ordered that fight yet.
Though because Tunde Ayahi and Anthony Yarde really want that fight, and because Frank Warren's always had a way with the WBO that's also in pretty good with...
Oh yeah, they're in pretty good with Bob Arum.
The network connections and relationships are already established that could see this fight coming into fruition if the Joe Smith Jr. people don't get either a Canelo-Alvarez fight or an Artur Beterbiev unification match. And when it comes to that potential Artur Beterbiev unification match, Mark Ramsey, Artur Beterbiev's trainer, says the Joe Smith Jr. talks are ongoing, responds to claims of ducking. That's right. Joe DeGuardia very recently stated that the Joe Smith Jr. people wanted that fight, but the Artur Beterbiev people, not so much.
We talked about it here on the channel.
Ramsey was taken aback by Team Smith's comments, claiming the only interaction they had was through Top Rank. It's really funny how the reality of some is not that the same as others, Ramsey told BoxingScene.com. We received only one phone call from Top Rank asking about our interest in a fight with Joe Smith Jr. at Madison Square Garden, and we told them we were interested and ready to listen to the offer. After that, they never contacted us about it. We didn't even have the chance to talk.
He says they never even got the chance to talk about money.
And I believe him. I believe Mark Ramsey, because I remember Bob Arum expressed some enthusiasm towards making that unification match, and then the news you heard about Joe Smith and what was in the future for him was Umar Salimov and a Daniel Jacobs fight at Madison Square Garden. I didn't forget. The Canadian-based trainer continued, a month later, Top Rank contacted us to tell us that we had to defend our title against our mandatory WBC challenger, Marcus Brown, which we did. The 37-year-old Beterbiev defeated Brown in the 9th round on December 17th at the Bell Center in Montreal, Beterbiev's adopted hometown. Beterbiev had to fight through half of the bout with a gruesome cut that was deemed the result of an unintentional head clash. Ramsey, who acts as the director of development for the Quebec promotional company Eye of the Tiger, noted that talks have resumed with Smith. We recently had some discussions on this subject of fighting Smith, and if the terms of the offer are acceptable, our answer will be affirmative, Ramsey said, adding that they want the Smith fight ASAP. Artur is never one to back away from a challenge. Right now, it's just a matter of negotiations. Ramsey continued, with Artur, it's never personal. The goal
he set for himself is to hold the other belts.
Ramsey notes that Beterbiev's cut is healing on schedule. Artur has received 40 days without contact, so he'll be cleared to resume contact in mid-February, Ramsey said. He is already back in training, and the way that breaks down, it's either Joe Smith Jr. fights his mandatory challenger, Anthony Yarde, or he circumvents that mandatory by petitioning for an exception to it by way of a unification match with his stablemate, Artur Beterbiev. And I don't really even know if it's too late for a Canelo Alvarez versus Joe Smith Jr. fight, provided that Canelo were actually interested in it, because Artur's got a mandatory challenger.
Well, granted, it hasn't been ordered yet, but he's got one.
Time is of the essence. I don't have a horse in the race. I like all three of those fights. I like Smith versus Canelo. I like Smith versus Yarde. I like Smith versus Beterbiev. Have your pick. I'm okay with any one of those three options, those three fights. Though Joe's never had it easy, and it doesn't look like he's about to. He's either got a deal with Anthony Yarde, Artur Beterbiev, or Canelo Alvarez. Three guys who you could give decent odds to beat him. The saving grace for Joe, and the silver lining is, he's been the underdog before, at least 4 times, and he beat the odds then. Could he beat the odds now?
He's not in unfamiliar territory.
He really isn't. Joe Smith Jr., for the most part, has spent a good portion of his career, especially as of late, with his back against the wall, facing guys who were supposed to be able to beat him, but didn't. And that situation, it really hasn't changed. Out of those three guys, those three names, I'd say the Anthony Yarde fight is the more winnable fight of the three. Canelo Alvarez, you gotta hit this guy with a chair and shoot him.
You're not beating this guy on the card.
Joe Smith Jr. is a good fighter, elite level power, and a hell of a human interest story, but his defensive deficiencies are glaring deficiencies that someone like Canelo Alvarez really could capitalize on. I could see Canelo Alvarez teeing off on Joe Smith Jr. I just don't know if he packs a big enough punch to knock him out. However, I could see Canelo winning that fight. The Artur Beterbiev fight, it's slim pickings with Artur. Artur's a big puncher like Joe's a big puncher, but Artur comes from a more distinguished amateur background.
That's what's on the menu, sweetheart.
Yarde, Alvarez, or Beterbiev. Pick your poison.